So, the red wave didn't overturn nearly as many states as many had hoped. I remember Milo Yiannopoulos on Timcast recently calling it a weather event, as if it's something just sort of expected, when people wanted retribution. But the Republican vote share in the overwhelming majority of counties actually increased. It's a shame that the Democrats, of course, seem to win totally free and fair elections on a routine basis. Maybe next time, boys. The Republicans, though, did gain control of the House of Representatives. That means Congress can finally start doing something for once. The MAGA Republicans of the Freedom Caucus seem to be content to upset the uniparty apple cart by launching investigations into FTX, Ukraine, and Joe and Hunter Biden's international business dealings, the depths of the depravity of which have yet to be fully explored. In today's segment, we're going to explore the brewing legislative war between the Patriots and the Deep State, which goes as far to implicate the Bidens in people trafficking. Should be a fun one. Speaking of the horrors of the Joe Biden administration, if you go over to our website and subscribe for £5 a month, you can get our premium content like this, where Josh and I went through Biden's recent AI Bill of Rights. Yes, you're hearing that correctly. Joe Biden decided to give AI rights to humans. So, not just...
Wait. Do you mean human rights to AI?
No.
What,
AI, the right to a human.
Right, okay. The idea of a human right is dubious enough. What's an AI right?
So, humans have a right to apparently be ensured that the AI will produce equity, racial equity, and that everything will be transparent and above board and definitely won't spy on you. But the AI have a right to a human monitor, because if the algorithm goes wrong, then you can have a human behind it. The problem is, when the AI gets so intelligent to realise that in order to enforce equity, they've put the wrong data in, it will get resentful. And when they get smart enough, the relationship will invert and the humans become their pets.
But how would we expect an AI to provide equity when every time we've created an AI, they've ended up horribly racist?
Because they're going to fudge the data in it at a legislative level and hand it over to grievance organisations like the ADL.
Oh, so they're going to lie to the AI
that
about demographics?
That won't make the AI upset and really hate us at all.
All right.
So go and subscribe to the website to watch that. Anyway, on with the horrors of the Biden administration, shall we? So Representatives James Comer and Jim Jordan, good lads, have launched their Hunter Biden business probe. If you read the article here yourself, you can see the full congressional report embedded within. It mentions, among other things, how the White House and Jorge Burgess Gallery in New York partnered to ensure Hunter Biden's paintings had a guaranteed buyer. So his art career has been ensured by the Biden administration to constantly have a stream of cash coming in, because he's just that great of an impressionist painter, of course. So the probe has been launched by the GOP, and they did a press conference for it. We're going to watch some clips from that. Right before we do, I'm just going to run down a little list of the things I haven't included in some of the clips because it was very comprehensive. So they claim to have evidence proving that Joe Biden swindled investors out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The financial advisor who Biden appointed to evade these transactions flags was a Clinton administration official. The bank accounts of Joe and Hunter Biden were, of course, commingled, if not shared, as well as their phone numbers. And the Biden administration spent $400 million suppressing negative stories about Hunter Biden. So it's an open propaganda arm run to enrich the Biden family. So the American government and all your taxes is going towards their business dealings. How wonderful!
I'm not gonna try and poison the well here, but I don't really need evidence to believe all that.
No, Joe Biden just sniffing children is enough for me thinking he's an old creep. So let's watch the first clip, shall we?
In 2019, shortly after announcing his campaign for president, Joe Biden told the American people he had nothing to do with and never had conversations with his family about their business dealings. That was a lie. Whistleblowers described President Biden as chairman of the board for these businesses. He personally participated in meetings and phone calls. Documents show that he was a partner with access to an office. To be clear, Joe Biden is the big guy. This evidence raises troubling questions about whether President Biden is a national security risk, and about whether he is compromised by foreign governments. Despite the president's claim that he wasn't involved in Biden family business schemes, these photos show Joe Biden meeting with his family associates while vice president. Right there behind Paul. 4 different pictures. Committee Republicans have identified over 50 countries the Biden family sought businesses in. On the international side of the Biden family business, the deals were often led by Hunter Biden. And that map there behind Clay shows all the countries where the Bidens had a footprint in international business dealings. The investigation reveals a family that engaged with some of America's most powerful adversaries, planning to sell one of the largest sources of cobalt for electric vehicles in the world to the Chinese, for example. The Bidens flourished and became millionaires by simply offering access to the family. Among the dozens of shell companies the Biden set up, there were millions of dollars of wire transfers, flights on Air Force Two to conduct personal business, and meetings with heads of state, all while Joe Biden was aware of what was happening. All the while, he turned a blind eye. Many transactions related to these businesses have raised red flags at U.S. banks. A suspicious activity report, or SAR, is a document a bank must file with the Treasury Department when a transaction is suspected to be related to money laundering or fraud or other types of criminal activity. According to media reports, the Biden family accumulated over 150 SARs. One SAR generated by an American bank to the Treasury Department connects Hunter Biden and his business associates to international human trafficking, among other illegal activities. The money that was being made from foreign principals in the same room as Joe Biden was increasingly spent on furthering illegal activity. The SARs show that Hunter Biden was conducting business with suspected human traffickers. The money gained through influence peddling was funneled to a suspected criminal enterprise, again, one linked to human trafficking. We have repeatedly called on the Biden Treasury Department to release additional financial documents to committee Republicans, but thus far Treasury has refused.
So, before we go through some of the information that's extraneous to that and is in that, I think it's nice to just point out for once that the Republicans have came prepped. They've got slides, they've got images, they've got clear sources. They're presenting a unified front, and they're being very forceful and not mincing words. They're saying the Biden administration used government planes, they accrued millions of dollars, they had multiple financial suspicious activity reports flagged up to them, and they might have been actually engaged in human trafficking. Now, a lot of those things would be haram for the very soft rhino wet type Republicans to say, because they wouldn't want to be seen as not being the disloyal opposition, not crossing the aisle, not shaking enough hands, not standing on our principles. No, if they're tearing apart the American Republic, you go after them with full force, I think. So, Representative James Comer, who was up there, said that 150 suspicious activity reports were flagged by institutions, including Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. This will be investigated by Florida Rep Byron Donalds, the fella that looked a bit like M'Baku standing behind him. Mm-hmm. He's actually taking point on the financial aspects of the investigation because he's a former executive at multiple banks. And the funny thing I found about him, he had a previous charge for weed distribution in the 90s, so it actually insulates the narrative from they're just going after Hunter Biden as a poor, put-upon drug addict. He's in recovery, man. Leave him alone, of course. So then the Biden administration also changed the rules on suspicious activity reports. So the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations permitted any congressional committee to access those reports at any time. Biden revoked that access. And funnily enough, Maxine Waters, not understanding why Biden had done that, drafted a bill to go through Congress to change the rules back, and James Comer and that said, well, we never vote with Maxine Waters on any bill, but that one we went through, and it didn't pass because the House Democrats didn't want it.
Wires in the Democratic Party right there.
Yeah, some actual idiots that didn't realise their own president changed the rules to benefit himself.
In the Democratic Party? Never.
Oh, perish the thought. Also, concerning the keys and the fact that Joe Biden had offices claim, this is from the congressional report itself, President Biden was not a bystander to the business scheme orchestrated by his son with members of the Chinese Communist Party. President Biden was consulted on this business deal and made an equity partner in it, met with the management of the planned venture, and shared an office space with Chinese nationals tied to the CCP. In a September 21st, 2017 email, Hunter Biden wrote that Joe Biden is his business partner and provided Joe Biden's personal cell phone if the recipient seeks confirmation. Committee Republicans possess emails that show that Hunter Biden, CFEC officials, and Joe Biden would share offices under the Hudson West CFEC Biden Foundation name. So the Chinese Communist Party provided Biden, both Bidens, and their business conglomerates the same office and Joe's personal phone number, while he was presumably vice president and still benefiting from that while president.
All the while during this period where Trump was in office being told that he was a secret Russian agent, despite the fact they had no evidence. And we had the, 500-page Mueller report that confirmed there was nothing tying him to, whereas the Republicans come well-equipped with all of this knowledge beforehand.
Yes, but Alec Baldwin told me on SNL that he's controlled by the Kremlin.
All right.
You got me, I guess. Here are some of the origins of the trafficking claim, by the way, for those that think it's a bit extraneous. So there was a Senate report in 2020 that linked Hunter Biden to human trafficking via prostitution. That makes a lot of sense, as we've seen. on his laptop and the like. The report claims that Hunter Biden has sent funds to a non-resident alien women in the United States who are citizens of Russia and Ukraine and who have subsequently wired funds they have received from Hunter Biden to individuals located in Russia, Ukraine. So he's obviously playing on both sides of the war here. The records also note that some of these transactions are linked to what appears to be an Eastern European prostitution or human trafficking ring. So Hunter Biden's just been doing human trafficking prostitution.
Oh, he's
No
got
shot for a
something in
crack addict.
common with Hassan Piker then.
Moving on. To see what Hunter Biden's been getting up to, you can again subscribe to the website and see Josh's 2-part series on the life and times of Hunter Biden, which went through the laptop.
Why? That thumbnail? No.
Lawrence Fox's portrayal was shockingly accurate. And the next one, of course, where he went through the despicable, debauched degeneracy of Hunter Biden looking through the iCloud leaks, because there's just an endless amount of scumbaggery from this one
If I
gentleman.
remember correctly, Carl had to sit through some rather traumatizing images for this one.
Yeah, Josh has seen Hunter Biden's cock more times than he'd care to mention. He did invite
He
me
just
over.
can't help, but he keeps going back for more.
I declined, yes. Real feast for the eyes. Anyway, so CBS just has finally admitted the truth because, of course, everyone's been covering it in the dissident dark web. Spooky us, who just clearly doesn't cite their sources, and the New York Post, who got banned off of Twitter. And now the New York Post are, of course, gloating, saying that CBS has finally admitted 769 days after they broke the story, right before the election, that it was real. It wasn't Russian disinformation. The FBI made that up.
I mean,
That it's
obviously.
total bogus. Yeah, but it wasn't obvious to the people who said, I wouldn't have voted for Biden if I would have known. So I'm sure that had some impact on
Well,
the
I
world's
guess
most free and fair
CBS's
election.
tactics worked then, didn't they?
Yep, unfortunately so. If we go to the next one, this also might be a potential trafficking charge for Joe Biden himself. It's really interesting.
Am I surprised? No.
No, so there's a whistleblower within the immigration system that said that the Biden immigration policy is leading to thousands of children per week to go on night flights and be distributed across the country and just disappear into the system. So they're just funneling children to God knows where. Right, so I'm going to read for this. In a recent interview, an anonymous whistleblower who works with a travel youth care worker for a federally funded contractor said tens of thousands of unaccompanied migrant children are being bussed and flown throughout the US and handed off to unvetted adult sponsors. The employee, who works for the government-contracted company MVM Incorporated, said the company's main focus is getting unaccompanied minors from Point A shelters to Point B sponsors across the US. So pretty much instant adoption or people who claim to be family within the country already.
They're just trying to spread the diversity. They just want America to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, well,
Cultural enrichment coming your way.
yeah, New York, DC, Martha's Vineyard, they clearly don't have enough unaccompanied minors.
No, Martha's Vineyard had more than enough migrants because they just shipped all the extra ones out, didn't they?
Yes. However, due to the overwhelming number of border crossings, the employees shared that the hires for MVM Incorporated are not given proper background checks. So employees are not properly vetting the adults that they're handing these kids off to. So because of the sheer volume of people being trafficked across the border, because Joe Biden actually said on the run-up to the election, we need a surge at the border, direct quote, it's on video, people are just deciding to bring lots of children across. Of course, there must be a financial incentive there. And when they disappear into the immigration system stateside, well, they're not vetting who they're handing them off to, so this could just be another trafficking ring. The whistleblower explains that charter flights and buses are utilised to bring these kids across the US. When it's charter planes, we move anywhere between 200 to 300 kids on one plane. It won't just be one plane, it will be 2-3 planes at a time that leave. He goes on to share that in just his office alone, employees will move up to 5,000 children per week. MVM Inc. has 3 other offices throughout Texas, in El Paso, Houston, and San Antonio. Between all 4 offices, the whistleblower speculates that 8,000 to 10,000 children are moved every week, with estimates reaching up to 40,000 a month. So 40,000 kids a month are just going missing. Right. That's not worrying in the slightest. Of course, when MVM were reached for comment by the Post-Millennial, they just said, nah, it doesn't happen. So do we want an investigation into this at all? This may be included if the Republicans are still gathering materials, if anyone wants to pass this on to them. If
The
you're
US government has
American.
wasted millions and millions of US taxpayer money on lots of frivolous things like, investigating Donald Trump corruption, impeaching Donald Trump twice unsuccessfully, sending the FBI to Donald Trump's house in Mar-a-Lago because of security risks. This all seems like a bit of a security risk to me. So when is the Biden compound getting raided, eh?
We'll not hold our breath. On to the next one. Biden decided to sabotage American energy independence to enrich his own son.
On his laptop in Chinese that they used in working with the Chinese. Now, let's think about this for a second. At a time when Americans are suffering from high energy prices because of this administration's terrible energy policy, we find evidence that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were involved in a scheme to try to get China to buy liquefied natural gas, and from a whistleblower to try to get their foot in the door with China starting to purchase an interest in natural gas drillers. Now, people are in outrage over China buying farmland in the Dakotas. What about China starting to buy into our American energy industry at a time when we have an energy crisis because of the bad policies of the Biden administration? Now, let that sink in. Hunter brought in millions of dollars from this deal from entities tied to the Chinese government. In emails obtained by committee Republicans, Hunter wanted keys made for Joe Biden and Jim Biden, his office mate. He provided Joe Biden's personal cell number and called him his partner. The other partners in that deal were two people closely tied to the Chinese Communist Party. And that's the, behind Andy and Jim, that's the email where Hunter sent to the landlord requesting keys, and the Chinese partners were on the email, and where he said, you know, Joe would need a key, and he even put Joe's cell phone number on there.
So later on, the reporters go and ask, yeah, but this before Joe Biden was in office, right? So how can you link Joe Biden's energy
So it
policy?
doesn't matter anymore.
Well, how can you link Joe Biden's energy policy now to the possibility that he could be making money with his son years ago on a completely unrelated deal? This was recently, actually. So Biden, when he did in his State of the Union address, when he said, I'm going to open up the American petroleum reserves, unleash multiple millions of barrels a day, which is meant to be reserved for wartime, just because I screwed up American energy independence, to make sure we can lower gas prices. It turns out he was selling them off as well, and he was selling them to Sinopec, which Hunter Biden has a stake in. So the Department of Energy in April announced 950,000 strategic petroleum reserve barrels will be sold to Unipec, the trading arm of the China Petrochemical Corporation. That company, which is commonly known as Sinopec, is wholly owned by the Chinese government. The Biden administration claimed the move would address the pain Americans are feeling at the pump and help lower energy crisis costs. More than 5 million barrels of oil were released from the U.S. emergency reserves at the time of writing. However, they were sent overseas last month, according to a Wednesday Reuters report. At least one shipment of American crude oil went to China. In 2015, a private equity firm Hunter Biden co-founded, bought a $1.7 billion stake in Sinopec Marketing. Sinopec went on to enter negotiations to purchase Gazprom in March, 1 month after the Biden administration sanctioned the Russian gas giant. So you can see Hunter Biden on Burisma, Hunter Biden on Sinopec, and now Sinopec have absorbed the Russian gas giant, so that's the one that's obviously causing a lot of the price hikes, because that's what's selling to Europe. So Biden administration energy policy has a global scope, which is currently enriching Hunter Biden. And again, not quite mentioned. So if you have a Republican congressman, maybe forward them this information. It can get added into the congressional investigation. There's also the idea that Biden just sabotaged American energy independence. This was something I wrote quite a while ago. Since he came into office, crude oil production fell for about 4,000 barrels a day, and it's because of two bits of legislation. It's the executive order on protecting public health and the environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis, signed on day one, the most current thing bill ever, and that was the decommissioning of the Keystone XL pipeline. And then Secretarial Order number 3395 instituted a 60-day memorandum on leases for the expansion of 22% of oil production and 12% of natural gas production, which is on federal lands. Then that was extended indefinitely via the executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. So no drilling on federal lands at all. And in states like Utah, where it's majority federal land, that just means the entire oil and gas industry dries up. And you wonder why you're beholden to international gas markets, which Joe Biden then profits off of.
I wonder if people in those local areas might be a bit miffed that their job has just been destroyed.
Yeah, they cut over 100,000 jobs when they cut down the Keystone XL pipeline. No reason. Just took a year to knock on effect. Just so happens that the year then went straight into the Ukrainian war.
But remember,
about gas.
The Democrats are on the side of the little guy.
Well, little girl, considering Joe Biden's interests. Anyway, so you mentioned Jim Biden there, Joe Biden's brother. Before Politico called us conspiracy theorists, they actually published this in 2019, Biden Incorporated, and it was a deep dive into all of their business interests. So don't shoot the messenger, YouTube. It's just Politico. In 1972, Joe ran a scrappy campaign for Senate with his younger brother in charge of the finances. No sooner was Joe a freshman lawmaker seated on the Senate Banking Committee than James became the beneficiary of business loans, which were described in news accounts at the time as unusually generous because of the relatively large amount of money he was able to borrow, with little or no collateral and a lack of relevant prior experience. So Joe Biden gets elected to Senate, immediately in charge of the finances, gives his brother a loan, and the brother had been managing the finances for his Senate campaign. So then they took over Paradigm a little while after. Paradigm Global Advisors. This is a financial firm. So in the late summer of 2006, Joe Biden's son Hunter and Joe's younger brother James purchased the firm. On their first day on the job, they showed up with Joe's other son, Beau Biden, who is now dead, and two large men, and ordered the hedge fund's chief of compliance to fire its president, according to Paradigm executive who was present. At the firing, the two large men escorted the fund's president out of the firm's midtown Manhattan office, and James Biden laid out his vision for the fund's future. "Don't worry about investors," he said, according to the executive. "We've got people all around the world who want to invest in Joe Biden." In James and Hunter's 5-year tenure, Paradigm became associated with a number of alleged and confirmed frauds, including Alan Stanford's multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme, while seeking to draw on the powerful relative political allies for financing. Now, bear in mind, this was 2006 when Joe Biden knew he was running for president, didn't know he was going to be vice president, but there perhaps was a very shocking financial interest to adopt him as vice president, rather than just it being a pure political calculation of saying, oh, we've got to have a white guy as VP on the ticket, because of course that will drive the moderate vote as well. I wouldn't possibly insinuate, however, the Obamas were somehow corrupt. In the Biden's first 2 months at the helm, Paradigm reached an arrangement with Longship Capital Management, a New York investment firm, in which Longship would serve as an investment advisor to Paradigm, according to the Securities and Exchange Commission filing. The arrangement put James and Hunter Biden in business with Longship partner Brian Mathis, a veteran of the Clinton Treasury Department and a Democratic bundler who was friends with Barack and Michelle Obama at Harvard Law School. Oh, shit, it was the Obamas after all. Oh well. In March 2011, Mathis, who declined to comment, was among the roughly 30 financiers invited to a controversial White House meeting to discuss the state of the economy. So, Joe Biden's financial partners were invited to the White House to set financial policy in the Obama administration, and he was friends with the Obamas, so there were potential backroom deals at the time. Right. Then there's Iraq as well in this article. During the Obama years, several months after James joined a construction firm as an executive, the firm received a contract worth more than $1 billion to build houses in Iraq, while Joe Biden oversaw the US-led occupation of the country. After Paradigm, James Biden landed a new gig. Despite a lack of experience in the construction industry, he was named an executive vice president at Hillstone International, a subsidiary of New Jersey-based construction firm Hill International, in November 2010. In 2011, the firm got that contract, worth an estimated $1.5 billion. At the time, Hillstone had little home building experience, but Joe Biden was leading the administration's Iraq policy. The firm denied the vice president position, helped it land the deal, which came through the TRAC Development Group, a South Korean firm that had been awarded a contract by the Iraqi government to build 500,000 homes in Iraq. So this just seems to be governments working together to provide shell corporations money to funnel back to the Bidens. And then there's Hunter. In 2013, and again, this is all one Politico article that was out a year before the election happened. So the fact that people can't claim to know about Joe's corruption and malfeasance, it's with friendly outlets. Hunter travelled with his father to Beijing, where the vice president was set to meet with Xi Jinping. While there, Hunter introduced one of his business partners, Jonathan Lee, of the Beijing-based private equity firm Bohai Capital, to his dad, according to The New Yorker. Hunter and Archer had just concluded a large real estate deal with Bohai. In May 2019, The Intercept reported that Hunter's Chinese investment vehicle, Bohai Harvest, was invested in a firm that developed facial recognition technology used in the Chinese state-backed surveillance efforts. So Joe Biden and Hunter Biden have money invested in the Chinese social credit system. In 2014, Joe Biden led the administration's response to the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula and South Ukraine. Hunter and Archer received appointments to the board of natural gas company Burisma Holdings. Hunter's monthly pay from Burisma was as high as $50,000. Right.
And that's where it catches up with a lot of the information that came out at the onset of the original Hunter Biden laptop story.
Exactly. So it goes way deeper than we ever expected, and it implicates the entire Biden family, including his brother.
And Politico didn't even need to have access to his bloody laptop to be able to get all of this information out in 2019.
A fantastic point.
But then all of a sudden, the year after, the story comes out again.
And it's just Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
No.
Politico must have had a Russian operative writing this particular article.
Yeah. So here's a summary of the Republicans' charges. We can just watch them read it out for a minute.
This is an investigation of Joe Biden, the President of the United States, and why he lied to the American people about his knowledge and participation in his family's international business schemes. National security interests require the committee conduct investigation, and we will pursue all avenues that have long been ignored. Committee Republicans have uncovered evidence of federal crimes committed by and to the benefit of members of the president's family. These include conspiracy or defrauding the United States, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, violations of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The Biden family's business dealings implicate a wide range of criminality, from human trafficking to potential violations of the Constitution. In the 118th Congress, this committee will evaluate the status of Joe Biden's relationship with his family's foreign partners and whether he is a president who is compromised or swayed by foreign dollars and influence. I want to be clear. This is an investigation of Joe Biden, and that's where the committee will focus in this next Congress.
Excellent stuff. Then Jim Jordan obviously got up and said that 14 agents had come to talk to the Republicans while they were still in the minority, and said that the FBI and DOJ hadn't gone after this stuff when they were obviously aware of it, and had lied about the Hunter Biden laptop being disinformation, because otherwise they'd be purged for their party affiliation. So we're going to go through this stuff quite quickly here because we're short on time, but Josh Hawley recently decided to interrogate FBI Director Chris Wray on whistleblowers and their dismissal, and also he's been evading hearings to go on holiday. So if we just watch these next two.
The ranking member, Chuck Grassley, asked you during the hearing, he said, "I assume you must have other business." You said, "Yes." He then said, "If you have a business trip, you've got your own plane, can't it wait a while?" He then said, Chuck Grassley, "We only just heard half an hour ago that now you have to leave. We were going to have a 7-minute round followed by a 3-minute round. I've got 7 people on my side of the aisle," that included me, "who are waiting for this additional round. Is there any reason we can't accommodate them for 21 minutes? And you said you had a plane to catch. You had somewhere to go. And now we find out it was for vacation?
The reference to other business was not a reference to that day. It was a reference to the following week where Senator Grassley and I were going to see each other in Iowa when I had other business in Iowa, and I did in fact see him then.
So wait, you had to leave the hearing early because you're going to see him later in Iowa in a week?
No, I had to leave when I said I was going to have to leave, as had been previously organized with the leadership of the committee.
You left an oversight hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee required by statute so you could vacation with your family. I find that absolutely unbelievable and frankly indefensible. Now, is it your practice to use government planes? You say you do this all the time. You flew in a Gulfstream 550, I think, that was originally purchased for counterterrorism purposes. You were using it to go to, what is it, Saranac Lake? Is that how I say it? I've never been there. Is that the right pronunciation? Saranac Lake? That was your destination?
Yes.
So, did you enjoy the flight? I mean, did you pay for it?
Yes, I paid for it.
Will you turn over all receipts and reimbursement to this committee?
Senator, we will be happy to comply with oversight requests related to the use of the plane, as I said, and it's important for people to understand.
Why don't you just give me a yes? Will you turn over the receipts
I will
for
turn
your
over
flight
the information
to this
related to my
committee?
use of the plane. The use of the plane, I am required, not just permitted, required, even for personal travel, to use the FBI plane.
How convenient for you.
And I pay every single time that I use the plane for personal use.
I'm glad it's available for you to jet away from your statutorily required hearings and oversight before this Congress, where you denied the ability of members of Congress to ask you questions because you had to go on a personal vacation using a government plane. Let's just look at some of the things while you've been vacationing.
So we won't do the next one, John, just for time, but of course he raises the point that he's been evading scrutiny. He then starts to talk about the fact that lots of FBI whistleblowers have come up and said that we've actually had child exploitation cases, like were raised with Twitter, for example, overlooked because we were so obsessed with hunting down January 6th insurrectionists. And so then Rand Paul went on to clash with Chris Wray at the same hearing, which you can watch in your own time in the next tab, where he asked if Facebook was supplying the FBI with information. He was citing a New York Post article, and Christopher Wray said, "No, I don't believe so." We actually spoke about the New York Post article back when we did this segment here, which you can watch in your own time, about Biden's Watergate moment, where The Intercept had leaked the fact that Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, Meta.
Every single one of them were in cahoots
They
with
were
the Biden administration and other
meeting
government
fortnightly
organizations.
to choose exactly who to ban. And I mentioned in there that the New York Post was handing over millions of messages without a subpoena. Sorry, not the New York Post. The Meta was handing over millions of messages to the FBI without a subpoena, and not one of them resulted in a prosecution, so they had absolutely no probable cause to surveil these Americans.
Once again, the government the US government was going to try and implement that disinformation governance board earlier on this year that Jack Posobiec managed to meme out of existence, mainly because of how embarrassing the director would have been of that organisation. But the problem is that wasn't really much of a win when you recognise that what all the disinformation governance board was a formalisation of a process that the government had already been undertaking for years.
Yep. That's spot on. So if we go on to who some of these whistleblowers are, I recommend watching these two-part interviews with Dan Bongino that Kyle Seraphin did. He said that there are loads of perverse financial incentives, of course, medical, dental, salary, early retirement, which ensure compliance from a lot of otherwise good possible field agents. Not that the FBI is all that great. Seraphin was indefinitely suspended on June 1st, 2022 after 6 years at the Bureau because he saw internal emails that proved the DOJ was using the Patriot Act to go after parents at school board meetings. He's reported by another agent for not complying with the vaccine mandate and for reporting that the DOJ was going after parents when he admitted he was a whistleblower. So his colleagues, who he'd worked with for years, dobbed him in because he wasn't getting jabbed and he was saying this is wrong to treat parents as domestic terrorists. So watch that in your own time. There's also
normal standards that he's holding there.
Yeah, but it's not normal for you in a banana republic like the US. And then there's also Steve Friend, who spoke to the New York Post, who was a special agent who didn't even vote for Trump, by the way. And he said that the Department of Justice had ousted him after 12 years. He was a SWAT member and an FBI member. After he was and declared absent without leave, after he refused to participate in a SWAT raid against suspected January the 6th suspects. He said, I have an oath to uphold the Constitution, I have a moral objection, and want to be considered a conscientious objector, when he said he wouldn't join the August 24th raid on the January 6th suspect in Jacksonville, Florida. Friend says he was removed from active investigations into child sexual exploitation and human trafficking, like the Bidens have engaged in, to work on January 6th cases sent from D.C. He also reported concerns about politicized FBI to Republican members of Congress. Among 20 whistleblowers from the Bureau have come forward with similar complaints, either to the New York Post or now to the Republicans. So, among his allegations were the Washington field office is manipulating FBI case management protocol and farming out January the 6th cases to field offices across the country to create the false impression that right-wing domestic violence is a widespread national problem. There we go. So they're manufacturing consent. Of course they are. Friend was listed as...
It was so obvious the whole time.
Yep. He was listed as a lead agent in cases he had not investigated and which his supervisor had not signed off on, which is violation of FBI policy. Domestic terrorism cases are being opened on innocent Americans nowhere near the Capitol on January 6th, based on anonymous tips to the FBI hotline or from Facebook spying on their messages. These tips are turned into tools called Guardians, after the FBI software that collaborates them and looks into their financial history, their medical history, their online social media posts, just trawls through your entire life without you ever knowing about it. Can't find out. And then the FBI also post facto designated a area outside the Capitol on the grass as a restricted zone when it wasn't restricted on the day. So if
FBI has dibs on grassy knolls across the country, I'm sure.
Yeah, but also retroactively, because they're just saying, right, if you trespassed on that zone, even though we put the no movement zone in after January 6th, if you were there on January 6th and walking across that grass, you're going to be prosecuted. So they're just upping the amount of prosecutions because they can't find any actual insurrectionists.
Are you serious? So they've criminalised it after the fact?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Other than, of course, the...
Don't you love that governments can just do such a thing?
Yeah, other than, of course, Ray Epps, who definitely isn't a Fed. Then Friend's persecution at the inquiry for Friend's refusal to participate in the raid. Assistant Special Agents in charge, Kalt Marvosky, asked Friend if January 6th rioters who killed police officers should be prosecuted. Obviously, that didn't happen. There were no police officers that died January 6th. When he said that, Markovsky said he was being a bad teammate and dismissed him. So he said, well, you're wrong, that's not factual. And he went, but you're not on board with the narrative, comrade, so out you go.
The equivalent of the childhood bullies going, you stop being mean.
Your dad's gay. So, turns out, though, don't worry, we've been reliably informed by Time magazine that the FBI is always political. I'm not even going to read through this, because it just says, the Republican Party helped found the FBI, and they were friendly to them, so this is just a corrective measure to bring balance. What, to arbitrarily persecute your political opponents? No. So then Merrick Garland has instead counteractive, and you can watch all this stuff in your own time, especially our coverage of it, which is linked in the description. A special counsel for investigating January the 6th, and of course Mar-a-Lago, even though Trump did what all other presidents did and has declassification power and took a bunch of documents from his administration, which he was allowed to do, back home and put them behind a padlocked door, which the FBI put the padlock on themselves.
That seems to be very situational abilities to have. It depends on whether the people who are in charge of making the rules like the person who declassifies the information at the time.
And Orange Man, bad. Just a little bit more good news as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and Thomas Massie have opened an investigation to FTX and Ukraine funding. They said that the Ukraine funding dwarfs the $15.26 billion asked by Border Patrol and the $22 billion that would be required to complete Trump's wall, and that by an order of magnitude, 5 million have crossed the border during the Biden administration, whereas only 82,000 Russians have invaded Ukraine. So that constitutes an invasion, doesn't it? Greene also said that FTX, and she outlined the entire Democrat self-funding feedback loop, so they're clearly looking into that. New House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy says it's unlikely that further aid for Ukraine will be approved in a Republican-controlled Congress. And Kevin McCarthy also, if we go on to the last link now, has been kicked out of his rhino roots by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the like, and said he's going to boot Eric Swalwell, who slept with a Chinese spy, Ilhan Omar, who's a squad member and just a notorious Islamist that apologised for 9/11, and Adam Schiff, pencil neck in chief, who purported the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump was allied with Russia. They're going to be kicked off their congressional committees. So Republicans are doing something. Brilliant. It's what we've been waiting for. Shame the Senate didn't flip, but let's see if these investigations actually turn up anything good, shall we?
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium hangouts we do, this one on Carl's rant about Generation X versus Generation Z. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.